everyone, and welcome to another month of the Global Monthly Video Hop over on YouTube. This month's collaboration from makers from all around the globe was to focus on techniques. So that was really tricky for me because I don't think of my process of creating as a series of techniques. However, I did fall back on one of my favorites, and that is to create a watercolor smooshing technique. I know that's probably not a technical name, but that's okay. And the card that I made uses the Butterfly Brilliance coordinating stamp set and die. Now this stamp is one large stamp that you actually use, and it's great to put over the top of a background. So this smooshing technique creates a background, and here it is here. I don't know if that's going to pick up properly. There we go. And it sort of gives this mottled watercolor background. So I've got a couple of tips and tricks in the video for you that you may not know about. One of those things is to use a white gel pen. Now technically Stampin' Up doesn't have one. They do have, I think in the latest catalogue, a chalk pen that uses white. I always have a Signo or something similar to that, Uniball perhaps, white gel pen on my desk. I use it to write on cards that with darker cardstock as the background. But this one just creates a very subtle difference, and I've also used Wink Of Stella on this one, and you can see that I did use one of the large dies that coordinates with the stamp as well. So thanks for joining us. Pop along to the others as well when you finish this video, and leave some comments. I know everyone really loves a little bit of feedback, and I hope you enjoy learning a few perhaps techniques or being reminded of some old ones that you might have forgotten about.
So let's quickly run through what you're going to need. This technique is like a watercolor style technique. A lot of people kind of call it the smooshing technique. Very simple card. We're using the Butterfly Brilliance stamp, which is a cling stamp set, but it's actually one solid stamp. And I'll show you how to use that with the stamparatus. You're going to need a white card base, which I have done so that it folds upwards like that. Then I'm using Tahitian Tide, one of our new in colors, and I've cut that one so it's slightly smaller. And then I've got my piece that I'm going to do the technique on. It's about 1 centimetre smaller again. So I'll put some measurements up over on my blog and below this video as well. I have used one of the main butterflies cut out, and I'll show you what we're going to do with that a bit later. So the stamparatus you will need some water in a little spray bottle. I've just got this one that was used for essential oils, basically is what it was purchased for originally. I have 3 colours: Tahitian Tide, Orchid Oasis, Parakeet Party. Again, all in colours from this year, the new catalogue. And I don't know if you can see it or not, but I have a piece of clear plastic. So this one, I own a Cricut machine, so I've used the cover for one of my sticky mats, but it can be anything, a piece of acetate. Often if you have got a new stamp set, they'll come with a piece of acetate, whether it's big enough or not. But I tend to collect these, or a piece of glass will actually do it. So like out of a photo frame, just be very careful with it. So I'm going to pop a few things aside. Like I said, very, very simple technique. I'm going to pop all these pieces away for the moment and just concentrate on this one central piece. I'm going to move my stamp set away as well, and my stamparatus, although I might get it ready. So the stamparatus, basically I'm going to end up having my stamp in here, so I will pop my image on there, and you'll see why shortly. I'll pop this one to the side, and I'll bring in that plastic matting. So pretty much all you're going to do is you're going to take your ink pads. Now if you have re-inker, you can use this as well. And you're just going to make some random markings a little bit bigger than whatever it is that you are using to push down onto it. So very basic technique. I'll take our parakeet party first. Whilst I'm using Tahitian Tide for the background of the card, I do want it to have a lot of this green in it to begin with. You can see where it takes the ink off the pad as well when you just tap it down like that. That will redistribute pretty well if you are storing them horizontally. Next one is the Tahitian Tide. Now I don't want as much, so I'm going to just try to use this section of the pad down. Not easy, and the good thing about these is that you can bend them a little bit. It just makes putting on some of that colour a little bit easier. Don't be afraid if they overlap slightly, and it doesn't matter if you get some of the ink onto your ink pad either. And finally, the Orchid Oasis, which is kind of a purpley colour, and I just want to pop it into those gap sections. I've got some gaps in there. This is a darker colour, so use less of it. Now this looks a little bit random. It's not going to come out like that, and I apologise. My ring light is giving off a bit of a halo effect on there. I'm going to take my water. I'm going to spritz. Now spritz from a fair distance away, but don't be afraid to add a fair bit of water so that it will start to bleed. Now I don't want it to combine too much, and I'll show you why in a second, but I do want it to be reasonably wet. So I'm going to take my white card and I'm going to plonk it down randomly and push. Now when you pull it up, there's going to be some white parts, and that's okay to begin with. Very pretty, because we are going to spritz again. Like I said, lots of colour in this one. Maybe let it move a little bit, and we're going to do a second smoosh. Like I said, it's going to get wet, which does mean it will warp a little bit. Now I've got some here in the corner. Don't know if you can see that or not. So I'm starting to just pick up colour where it's a bit light. So I'm adding a bit of colour where it's a bit light, and this will dry slightly lighter than what it is. So I'm going to move my sheet now. If you've got a baby wipe handy, wipe it over now. And here is my background. So the background, like I said, it's going to dry slightly lighter. I am going to use my heat tool just on one. I'm just going to run it over the top. Just hold it up slightly. And this is going to just take a minute to dry off. Now this is not the finished product, and as you can see, like I said, not a lot of that Tahitian Tide in there. I want a lot of contrast between the background that I've chosen. But if this is not what you planned or wanted, you can very easily go back in, add a little bit more over the top so that you've got a little bit more. But you can see it's kind of mottled, and it's got light and dark sections. This is what you want. It's kind of like a tie-dye effect. Maybe that's what I should name it, a tie-dye smoosh. Because you kind of don't ever know, like when you're doing tie-dye, the tie-dye process with fabric, you never really know what it is that you are going to end up with. Just make sure you turn it over and dry it from the back as well. And you will see it starts to warp. That's okay, because we're going to glue this down fairly well so it does sit flat. And then again dry from the front, and it warps back towards the front. You can see that starting to lighten up now, and a lot more of that green parakeet party coming through, which is probably my favorite color out of the in colors. I really was torn between that and the Tahitian Tide, but I think green is my go-to color. Whether it be a light green, a dark green, whatever, it is probably my favorite color. I wish I had more of it in my wardrobe, but it's actually a really hard color to get a hold of as far as like clothing goes. and even like other accessories as well. I did notice seems to be the bottle green is a bit of an in colour as far as clothing and fashion goes this year. Now I'm going to pop it down and just again dry it off. This is just on that number 1 setting. You could do it on number 2, but it warps a little bit more the faster you do it. You want it to be dry enough to stamp on. So those parts that are a little bit wetter, you can get really close to. Just don't stay on the one spot for too long. And of course, whatever you're doing it, whatever your backing is, like so mine's just a little laminate wooden table. It won't tolerate a lot of heat, so just be careful there. And I think we're just about done now. So I'll turn that one off. And I'm going to just show you what it will look like on the card with that blue, because it really picks up the blue. There we go. So a nice sort of feathered background there, tie-dyed. So I'm going to pop these back to the side, and we're going to bring in our stamparatus now. Now, I'm going to want this one, and I'm going to want it about there. So I'll move these over for a second. I want it kind of in the middle. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect, and I am going to stick a piece of, there we go, see how it sort of overlaps on the edges. I'm going to stick a scrap piece of paper in there so that my sponge that's in there doesn't get too marked with ink. So excuse me for a second. Put this in here. And I'm going to hold it down with my magnets, which is going to be tricky because it's not going to want to be in the right spot. So you've got to try and match it up so that it's in a gap. Like there. That's a gap. I don't know if you can see that or not, how I'm trying to line it up. And this one's not so much. So what I might do instead, a bit of a trick, is to put some double-sided tape on the back. And the best idea, I'll bring my shirt in, is to give it a couple of goes on like a shirt or something similar, just to add the fibres on the back, and you won't be able to see them, but those fibres will make it a little bit easier to come off the back. And I'll pop that one down. And I'll pop this one down. This will just stop it from moving if you have to re-ink your large stamp more than once, which is often the case. Double check that that's going to sit where I want it to. So the best way is to actually lay this over the top where you would like it. And I actually want it so that this stamp here actually gets most of it, and I'll show you why when we put it together. So give it a good push down. Now it's adhered to the right spot, and we're going to add some ink. So I'm going to use Memento Black for this one, and it'll probably take a couple of goes. Now a hint that I have for you is just get a stamp pad and pop it underneath. It just gives it a bit of a flatter surface to ink this stamp up. I'm just going to move it up so you can see lots and lots of ink. Oops. Over and over, and make sure that your ink pads are well re-inked with your re-ink bottle. And then I'm going to push across, and we're going to just rub, push down, like so, and up. Now this isn't the most perfect of images. I'll bring it up closer so you can see. So I am going to ink again. Second time. And this is often the case when you're doing these kind of techniques where the paper has warped. You will need to ink more than once. And you need to apply a reasonable amount of pressure to these stamps, so it's best if you can stand above your stamparatus and give it a little bit of a smoosh down, and because it's all adhered down, it's not going to move too much. So there we go, a much better inking. So now I'm going to remove that now. There we go, it comes off almost completely because I did do that pushing it against my t-shirt, and it picked up the extra fibre, so it will stick to the backing sheet and not so much to the card. It'll just roll off. Kind of makes it just semi-permanent instead of a permanent go. Okay, we're going to move this to the side. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pick up, because I really like the green, I am going to use my stamping blends, and I'm going to fill in a couple of sections. More so probably with the darker one. I'll show you what I mean. And I probably will use some of the Tahitian tide as well. So I'm just going to add a little bit extra in these sections of the wings, just to give a bit of depth, and on the edges. And this one. Just a quick flick to add a little bit extra there. It makes it stand out a little bit more. Now I am going to grab the Tahitian tide, and the lighter one at that, because I don't want it to stand out too much. Using the brush section again. This one is more like almost like a Ulysses butterfly, which is an Australian blue butterfly, found mainly up North Queensland, I think. Well, at least that's where I grew up, so that's where we saw them. And I'm going to add a little bit in here. And this little fella here hasn't had any. You don't have to be very accurate with this, mainly because it blends in. And there we go. So we're almost done, because this is such a quick card. So I am going to use adhesive, my Tombow glue, to glue this down. So very simply around the edge, not too much, but enough that it's going to smoosh out a little bit, and then plenty in the middle. Now this is mainly because I'm just not even really pushing any extra out. I'm just making sure that it's all kind of spread. And we're going to center that onto our Tahitian tide backing. And because there is plenty on there, you've got a little bit of wiggle room to get it in the center. And then I'm going to put my hands on it for a couple of seconds and hold it down just so it adheres flat. And this is where it's really good, because the background cardstock is flat and hasn't been warped at all. So if you can use a little bit of pressure, like so. Now, the next thing I'm going to do, if you have one of these are brilliant. It is a white gel pen. So this one that I have is by Signo. Here we go, Uniball Signo is mine. Some of them are a wider nib than others. This one is quite a fine one, but with a very light touch, quite a lot of white ink comes out. Now I know Stampin' Up don't sell these, but this is my go-to, always has been. It writes on darker cardstock, it adds just those highlights. So I'm going to use it to do some dots. Now I'll do a few, and literally just that little light circular motion will add the ink. And you're almost tapping it up and down. And what we're wanting is just to add to that background. Now I'll lift it up in a second. Just so you can see what I'm talking about. And it stands out particularly on the darker parts. So you go around and just add this randomly, really random, in pairs or threes. All in the background of the butterflies. So you don't want it on the butterflies themselves, just in the background. Now this gives like a speckled effect, and I'll show you what we're going to do next. So it's all about layers, this type of card. There we go. Then I'm going to bring in Wink of Stella. Now this is new to me. It sounds ridiculous, but it is new to me. I have been with Stampin' Up for a little while and I've never bought one of these. And it wasn't until I had received a card from one of my little card groups that send out beautiful cards to each other just to say hello. And it had this sparkly stuff on it and everyone had raved about it online. So anyway, I got myself one. I don't know, my ink barrel probably doesn't look quite right. I think it's got a bit of a leak, but doesn't matter. So I am going to use this and I'm going to brush it. And it'll be hard for you to see. From the bodies of the butterflies out onto their wings. Like so. Now can you see that? Oh, it's coming out quite nicely. But I do want it to have this like brushed out effect. So it's not on the entire wing. It's just giving that little bit of dimension. I'm going to leave this butterfly for the second. And I will, because we're going to overlay that with our cutout, our die cut. Now, Wink of Stella, you do not need much of. I know I heard everyone say it on videos previously, and I was like, yeah, sure. Until I used too much and it ended up everywhere. And you kind of lost the effect. If you use too much, everything sparkles and nothing stands out. So you don't want that. You do definitely want just that tiny bit so that it does glimmer and shine. Bigger butterflies you need a little bit more on, but the smaller ones you don't. There we are. Can you see that? It's much prettier out in when you go out in public, so to speak. Okay, I'm going to bring back that piece of paper that we used earlier for the background stamping, and I'm going to just fold it in half. I'm going to use my Tahitian Tide back here again, and oops, of course I did. And I'm going to use just a blending brush that I have, making sure that it's clean. Okay, and I'm going to add some texture or some shadowing to the wings, mainly to the top and to the bottom. I just want it to stand out a little bit more, and I just keep adding to the corner, and I don't know if you can tell, but it gives a real dimension. So to the other top corner of this butterfly. Now you could have chosen any butterfly. You can add more than one of the butterflies. This would work with a couple of other stamp sets where you can overlay the background stamping. You do a couple of background stampings and then there's a matching die that you can use. Now I'm going to the bottom here. Being fairly heavy-handed with how much ink I'm using because I really do want that shadow. I want it to really stand out. Now that won't matter because we are going to curl it in a second. So whilst it's still a little damp, curl those sections and then kind of lift it up in the center. Not too much, but you do want that three-dimensional look. Pop this away. I'm going to grab out my gel pen again, and I'm just going to add some detail in here. Almost like a shadow. And up their little feelers as well. So I'll bring that up so you can see it a little bit better. There we go. Very, very pretty. And our Wink of Stella, this time on the center only. So that's going to blend that gel pen back in. So it'll make it appear very light. Beautiful. Almost done. So we are going to adhere, these aside, adhere our base down. Again, to prevent the warping, I am going to add, don't always add in the center, but this time I will. You can spread it really well out. And then when you adhere it down, make sure that it opens the right way, and you just make sure that you hold it down for a second. And I'm going to just put my paper over the top because I don't want, all that Wink of Stella is still drying on the front, so I just would like to, instead of putting my hands all over it, I'll just put a piece of paper. That will avoid any smudging. Excuse me. And then, there we go. So it's all adhered down. Now I do want to adhere this one to mimic here. So I want it to be fairly accurate so it is shadowing over the top. So not a lot, and we're only adding it to the body of the butterfly, not even the feelers. And I am going to line it up so that it sits on top properly, like so, and just hold it there for a second. Now it does come slightly off the card. That's okay, that's what I wanted, like so. Finally, a sentiment. Now, the Butterfly Brilliance does not have a sentiment. And there are so many sentiments in all of our stamp sets. So I was kind of at a loss what sentiment I wanted to use, but I did end up choosing the Happiness Abounds. So I want a little banner to come across here, and I'm just going to use the Happy Birthday. So I'll grab that one out, which is, sometimes they're a bit tricky to work out. There's the Happy Birthday. I'm going to pop it onto a block. Oops. Now I am going to use a scrap piece of cardstock to stamp on. So wait a second. I'll just grab one of those out. Now I've chosen white because it will stand out, and I do want it to stand out, this one. Excuse me for a second. Oh, excuse me. I'm going to use the green, the Parakeet Party, and just to see how it turns out. It may not be dark enough, but hopefully it will be. Okay, ink it up, stamp it down. Don't worry if it's not perfectly straight, we'll fix it later. I think that stands out okay. So now it's time to cut that and just adhere it. So now that is reasonably straight. So I'm going to use and we want it fairly close. Ooh, good job. Right on the edge. And again, close to the edge. There we are, Happy Birthday. I'm going to trim up this side and banner cut this side. So I'm going to go right to where Happy starts and make sure it is straight. There we go. To banner cut, I'm just going to trim it back a little bit and then cut in the middle as a guide, and then cut up to that center mark and turn it over and cut up again. Perfect little banner, like so. And I'm going to pop it from there across, like so. And I am going to use a wonderful might use the minis actually for this one, just so it sticks on there. Oops. Use plenty of them. Take all your backings off, like that. Now, the idea of this card was to keep it as simple as possible. There we go, and we're going to stick it on here. Straight as I can. There we go. But what's a card without a couple of gems? So I'm going to use the iridescent gems. This will pick up a lot of those blues in there. And my little trick to putting gems on is to use one of two things. Either pointy nose tweezers, they're often good, or a little scalpel. And so I push it under so it sticks to the scalpel, like so. That just gives me the opportunity to push it down. I'm using all the little ones, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just add that sparkle, and there we have our gorgeous little card with the watercolor tie-dye smooshing technique. Thanks for joining me, everyone. Don't forget to go and pop her over and check out everyone else's videos. What a great hop this is going to be. Lots and lots of learning to happen. I'll catch you next time. Bye. Thanks everyone for joining me again today. You can like, comment and share this video. I would really appreciate that. Don't forget that the links for my Facebook and my Instagram are also below, and is the links to all the other creators for this hop. We'll see you again next month.